Next talk. That was too much fun. Let's talk about something more important. Is there mental health or is it... Well, actually, no. Let's rephrase it. Is there misogyny in psychiatry? And I think that's going to be an interesting one. So please welcome to the stage Shayna Weisz.
Hiya. I'm going to be talking about mental health or misogyny. So, to start with, I thought I'd go through the history of hysteria. Most people are familiar with hysteria, but it's commonly believed to have been something that Freud kind of invented, but actually it's been around since ancient times. It comes from the word hystera, which literally means wandering womb, and that's because the idea behind it is supposed to be caused by unfulfilled sexual desire in women. So women were not having enough sex, and that meant that the womb was not fulfilling its natural purpose, which was to conceive. So what that meant was that typically the cure would be wine and orgies, orgasms, marriage and conception. Unsurprisingly, this mostly affected older women, single women, widows, and women who'd been victims of violence. Hysteria, as I say, it went right from ancient times through the Middle Ages, Renaissance, and all the way up to Freud and psychoanalysis, where most people have heard of it today. And it had a wide range of physical and mental symptoms, so all sorts of things could be put down to hysteria. Depression, fatigue, seizures, headaches, aches and pains, which has led some people to suggest that it's simply a disorder of everything that men found mysterious or unmanageable in women. So, then we move on, and in the mid-1900s, hysteria sort of loses popularity, and we decide we need a bit more of an objective, scientific classification for mental health disorders. So in 1952, we created the DSM. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, where we list all the mental health disorders and their diagnostic criteria. The first one was created in 1952. We're now in our 5th edition. And even in the first one, like I said, hysteria had kind of already lost favour for being a bit of a sexist disorder, so it gets renamed somatization. Somatization is still in the DSM today. Oh, the arrows sort of jumped there, never mind. It's still in the DSM today, but today it's called somatic symptom disorder, and its diagnostic criteria are being really distressed about some kind of physical pain or ailment you might be experiencing. So getting pretty anxious that it could be a sign of something more serious. That's a mental health disorder, apparently. Another one I want to bring up that's still in the DSM today is not quite hysteria, but it's histrionic personality disorder, also kindly referred to as dramatic personality disorder. That's because its main criteria are being over-emotional and attention-seeking. Again, this is still considered a disorder in the DSM today. If you're getting my drift, this is a bit of this could be seen as a gendered diagnostic criteria because women are typically called over-emotional all the time, calm down, cheer up, love, and so on. Finally, another disorder that's still in the DSM today is probably one that you've heard of. It's quite common at the moment, is called borderline personality disorder. That's received quite a lot of criticism recently, again, for having gendered diagnostic criteria because it's mainly characterized by difficulty managing emotions, disinhibition, risk-taking, and inappropriate anger. So I put to you, who is anger more inappropriate for? Shrill, hysterical women or men for whom, anger is acceptable if not encouraged, and so on with risk-taking and being disinhibited. But you might ask, also my time is not going off, do you know that? It's fine, we'll just say I'm at 2. You might say, wasn't the whole point of the DSM to be a scientific and objective classification manual? Well, obviously I don't have time to fully go into it now, but a lot of people have questioned the scientific validity of the DSM. That's better, a bit of extra time for me. A lot of people have questioned the scientific validity of the DSM, and one of the reasons for that is because the way that their methodology for coming up with these diagnoses and these criteria they have admitted is it's a panel of 200 experts in the field who have a discussion and take a vote on what they think should be considered a disorder and what the criteria should be. So I don't know if that sounds scientific to you. And while I wasn't able to track down a list of all those 200 members, I was able to find the chairs and vice chairs of the DSM committee. It's these 5 guys. And another thing I'm just going to quickly mention is that 70% of that committee have financial ties to pharmaceutical industries. So raises some eyebrows there. But what this tells us is clearly there's been a history of taking women's ailments, especially non-conforming women, and telling them they're mad. In 1965, a psychiatrist called Elliot Slater followed up with 85 patients who had been diagnosed with hysteria in the 50s, and what he found was over 60% of them actually had a neurological disease, including brain tumours and epilepsy. 12 of them had died. Nowadays, studies show that women still struggle to have their pain taken seriously by doctors. One 39-year-old woman said that her GP made fun of her, saying, "What did I think my headaches were? A brain tumour." She was given antidepressants, sleep charts, analgesia, and it wasn't until she requested referral to neurology that she was indeed found to have a brain tumour. And the recent studies have shown that it does take women longer to be diagnosed with brain tumours, Crohn's disease, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, 6 out of 11 types of cancer, and many more. A whole book has actually recently been written about it. Where am I up to? So women, so this isn't just because it takes women longer to see a doctor in the first place, because this delay actually occurs after their first visit to GP. They'll also have to typically take more visits to the doctor than a man will have. And these diagnostic errors have real life effects. It's estimated that 40 to 80,000 people die per year in the US alone due to diagnostic errors such as these. So to talk about mental health more broadly, women are more likely than men to be diagnosed with any mental health condition in the first place. And this chart shows us specifically for many of the most common mental health disorders, women as compared to men are more likely to be diagnosed. So we've got here generalized anxiety disorder, depression, phobias, OCD, panic disorder, and this last one that stands for common mental disorder, not otherwise specified. Now, I'm not trying to say that I don't think women are really suffering and feeling distressed, but what I am saying is that I think the onus, in the way we frame these, the onus is being put on women, and a sort of implicit blame that the problem is with them as opposed to their surroundings. So I've got this chart to show you that women who are subject to poverty, violence, and abuse are also much more likely to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder than women who are not. And 55% of women in combined adversity, so who have experience of both violence and poverty, will meet the threshold for some kind of anxiety or depressive disorder. And one fact that I left out, women more likely than men to be diagnosed with a mental disorder, full stop, and this has been a discrepancy that's been rising over the years. In 1993, we were 2 times more likely to be diagnosed than men. Nowadays, we are 3 times more likely. So not only does this kind of place the blame on women for their external circumstances, but these are often used, these mental health labels are often used against them when making police reports or appearing in court. Women are routinely dismissed as delusional, over-emotional, manipulative, or misremembering events. So this brings me to my final point, which is what I think are some worrying mental health trends that I'm seeing today on social media. I think it's sort of becoming cool and trendy to diagnose yourself with a disorder. And what we're seeing on platforms such as TikTok is these videos, signs you might have, bipolar, depression, ADHD, and so on, taking sort of everyday behaviours and suggesting that they are signs that you might have a disorder. And because it's these sort of happy, smiling, sparkly women with dance music on in the background, I think it's making it seem cool and fun and trendy. It can also be demonstrated by dating apps that I've come across. I think I come across this more with women than men, where in the first line of their bios, they talk about their disorders with things like, I'm a crazy, free-spirited ADHD girl, and hashtag BPD warrior, and inattentive ADHD included, and things like that. I don't know what you think of them. I think it's a funny place to be showcasing your mental health disorders where you're trying to attract a partner. And then, of course, we get commercial brands and beauty products cottoning onto this trend and selling it back to us. So whether it's slogans on T-shirts, such as, she's a 10, but so is her anxiety, I put the hot in psychotic, beauty products selling us self-care, or the explosion of mental health apps teaching us, all these ways to deal with our mental health disorder, typically unscientific and typically heavily gendered as well. So how to recognize chronic procrastination in women, post-traumatic sleigh disorder. Anyway, I won't go through them all, but in conclusion, I wanted to say that I think it's really important that we all learn about the sexist history of mental health, the dangers and detriments of these labels, so that we can notice and resist where we might see sexism coming up in mental health today. Thank you. References.
Wonderful, thank you. The reset timer just finished. Perfect. Good. We've got lots of questions. I think that's the most questions we've had so far.
Ooh.
Cleo, which one should I ask first?
I don't know. I'm really struggling.
I'll go for the top. Sarah asked a question. Is there any regulation to protect vulnerable individuals from this misogynistic approach? And where did the question go?
Okay, I've been archiving them instead of highlighting them. I do apologise.
Wrong button. Sorry for that. I can't remember the end of the question.
They're all coming back.
On public health. Yeah. Okay. There it is again. I'll start. I finished, so I start. Is there any regulation to protect vulnerable individuals from this misogynistic approach and its impacts on public health?
And its impact on public health? Not that I know of. Does anyone else know of any? I don't know of any, no. I think vulnerable women are particularly at risk of these kind of misogynistic approaches. No, that's the point. I don't know. I might just be not very informed.
Good. Question from Anonymous. What was the name of the book written about how women take longer to be diagnosed with certain conditions?
I was going to say it in a moment, and I was afraid I was going to get the name wrong. I think it's called Doing Harm. And it's literally just come out. I've just bought it and I've not read it yet. But I read a BBC article which was about the book, and it was giving some of its key findings. So you can also, I've written the name of that BBC article is in my references, which is on my last slide. But I think the book is called Doing Harm.
Question from Jay. Are female doctors better for women?
I don't think they necessarily are, because I think it's more of a problem with the culture of psychiatry, and that even, female doctors and therapists themselves are going to be taught in the same way. They're going to be taught the same diagnostic criteria, and also we live in the same sexist world. And I think even women can be so shitty to other women sometimes. Like, it's not just men who do sexism, but I would still probably rather be seen by a woman. I'd probably feel a little bit more confident that she'd take me seriously. But yeah, I don't think I'd feel 100% confident either way when we are in the hands of what I think is just generally a not very scientific profession. I know it's a bit of a controversial view, but...
Another question from Jay. If not the DSM, then what?
Well, pardon?
ICD-10.
The ICD, yeah, so there is also the ICD-10 and 11, yeah, the ICD-10. I think that's the one they use sort of more in America, but it's a similar, the other way around. The DSM is the one they use in America. What do I think would be better instead of the DSM? Personally, I have a bit of a radical view on this. I don't know that I believe in a concept of mental health disorders as such, and in terms of being able to taxonomize and just list out criteria and put people into neat boxes. That doesn't mean I've worked out a perfect solution for how the world should work going forward and how we should look at mental distress, but I just think it needs to be something that much more takes into account our surroundings, our environment, our context, and our histories.
Good. Question from Anonymous. More women diagnosed with mental illness. Is it not also an issue that men don't seek help and therefore aren't diagnosed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little bit of both. So I see the public conversation as going, a lot of people seem to point this out to me, men need to speak to therapists more, men need to talk more about their mental health, and I do agree with that. I just feel like redressing the balance of the other side, which is to say women could also do this less. Women could be diagnosed a bit less and be taken more seriously in other realms, whether it's because they're seeking help for something physical, or maybe there's nothing wrong with them at all, they're an angry woman because they live in a shitty sexist world. Yes, men could also talk about their emotions more, absolutely. But there are some disorders that are more prevalent in men. So this does, that there are other statistics, or there are some disorders which are racialized as well. For example, schizophrenia, most commonly diagnosed in black men. So I think all the disorders need to be looked at holistically like that.
Yeah, definitely. Another question from Anonymous. How much of this is also complemented because of the different way we as a society socialize boys and girls?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the way we socialize. I mean, the way we socialize boys and girls absolutely is a huge part of what creates, I think, the sort of sexist world we live in. What creates misogyny is, I suppose, what you mean more is when men are taught, when boys taught it's okay to be angry and girls are taught it's not, perhaps something like that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that comes into it. But then again, the point wouldn't be taking a woman as an adult and saying, you're really angry, I think you might have BPD. I know it's more complex than that, and I'm obviously boiling it down, but that is why I was saying this thing about non-conforming women, is I do think often it's girls and women who step outside of these expected gender roles. I don't think it's intentional in that way, but that is what I think sometimes leads to it, is stepping out of these expected gender roles, being a woman who takes risks, who is disinhibited, who has plenty of emotions all over the place and isn't always keeping herself demure and smiling, and that's the bit where they put you on medication or send you to go talk to someone about your trauma. And yeah, obviously I don't agree with that.
And we'll finish off with a light-hearted question by Igor. Is it mainly sexism and desire to control women, or more of just old-timey, unscientific, genuine stupidity?
I think it's a false dichotomy, because I think scientific stupidity is largely to do with the sexism and white men thinking that they have all the answers and wanting to keep women in their place. I think those two concepts are very much interlinked. So that's often a reason we don't get objective science, is because we have sexist and other power structures in our minds when we're trying to be objective scientists, or historically that's been the case. Did that make sense? Yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So everybody, thank you, and a big applause for Shayna.